What's up, Spice fans and melange enthusiasts?
My name is Scoots.
I'm Sequeira.
And I'm Claire.
And welcome to WhoBrewedThis, the only cEDH gameplay channel edited by a priestess of our Lord and Savior, Karuga. WhoBrewedThis is all about rogue brews versus established decks. If you'd like to support us, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, join us on Discord for free, or just give us your feedback and suggestions. This week, we're back to our regular schedule, pitting rogue brews against established decks. We also have David, a friend of the channel, as our guest. He's starting up and playing win-conless stacks Tymna and Kamahl for big beats and big draws. Sequeira is on Sinestra's Golden Control Tasigur, save your puns. Claire is on Najeela Tempo, and I am on a spicy Ishai Kamahl stack. Time to check out our starting hands.
David mulliganed down to 6 and kept a hand that could go wrong. It mostly bets on a turn 1 Tymna thanks to Jewel Lotus and Temple Garden has his only ramp. This being a stacks deck, David wants to establish early dominance as fast as possible, and he might have to use that Enlightened Tutor for early ramp in order to drop the Archon of Emeria. The rest of his hand is top hand, with Elesh Norn as a way to nuke Claire's board and Archon of Valor's Reach as a way to take over the table's ability to cast instants. He sent Emrakul to the bottom. I mulliganed once and kept 2 lands in Tropical Island and Phyrexian Tower. Because I'm against 2 Rule of Law decks, I chose to lean over to Tasigur's mid-range potential more, keeping 2 beats of permanent interaction in Chain of Vapor and Abrupt Decay. Birds of Paradise is here for ramp, Seedborn Muse to abuse Tasigur, and a Vamp Tutor to go however I want. Card advantage, interaction, combo pieces, or a Neoform to turn Tasigur into Coma. Our awesome editor Claire kept a hand that guaranteed a turn to Najeela thanks to Chrome Mox and Avasim's Pilgrim. She has a ton of interaction to protect her Warrior Princess in Dispel, Fierce Guardianship, and Swan Song. She has Watery Grave and Wooded Foothills as lands, and albeit lacking a tutor or a way to end the game with Najeela in hand, can always pivot to manually punching our sorry faces. Finally, Scoots kept an aggressively taxing hand. One of his lands, be it City of Brass, Mana Confluence, or Plains, plus Sol Ring guarantees a turn 1 Thorn of Amethyst, just to annoy us all. He can follow that up with either Emil or a turn 2 Thalia and really drive that punch in. Plus, with Emil in hand, he is 1 combo piece closer to the classic Blood Pod loops with the Revi and Gaia's Cradle.
It's time for the Battle of the Biceps. Let's do this. David starts us off with a top-decked Command Tower and a Jeweled Lotus. We're not blind to his intentions to cast Tymna as he passes to Sequeira. Sequeira drops Tropical Island and casts a small Birds of Paradise before we move to Claire's turn. She drops and cracks Wooded Foothills for Taiga. Then she plays Avasin's Pilgrim for that sweet turn 2 Najeela. She then drops Chromox, pitching Dispel, and passing. I choose Violence, dropping a Plains, casting a Soul Ring, and then casting a Thorn of Amethyst, and pass to David. David starts things off by sending Tymna at Claire, as she has the most developed board state. He draws one from Tymna on his second main. He moves to second main and attempts to cast a Rest in Peace, and Sequeira is more than happy to remind him that's not possible due to the Thorn of Amethyst. No, really, he jumps at the chance to inform David of that. Imagine why. David passes.
This moment you just witnessed is decently common when 2 stacks decks share a table. You need to bounce off of each other, but at times you end up placing barriers on the other party and giving small openings to the other decks. However, this table is still pretty good for David. Having another stacks deck to play off of gives him the chance to establish more card advantage through Tymna. Right now, Scoots and David just have to fear Claire above all other threats on the table, as Najeela plays pretty well into several types of stacks.
It's Sequeira's turn. He plays Phyrexian Tower and passes, meaning either relevant interaction or just no good plays available. Claire drops Marsh Flats and casts Xena Warrior Princess. Najeela. That was a joke just in case you were born after the 90s. Claire passes without cracking the fetch, just in case Sequiera has an opposition agent. I play City of Brass and waste no time in going for Najeela's throat with a Swords to Plowshares. Claire cracks the Marsh Flats and we pause for the opposition agent. It doesn't happen. She gets an Underground Sea, and Fierce Guardianship neuters my attempt at turning Najeela into a farmer. With my floating mana, I cast the Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, ready to bury the table with taxes. David responds with an Enlightened Tutor for a Mana Crypt.
Scoots' taxing is a bit of a gamble here, mostly because Najeela is already established and in play. We really do need a way to take her out, or Claire could walk away with the match. There is an argument to be made about the moment where taxing effects move from tempo to potentially pushing other players towards the grub. However, it's also slowing down the rest of us. If Scoots' guess about Claire's ability to win at the moment pans out correctly, as she specifically requires the Revi in hand, he'll be able to build from there. Hopefully before the army of warriors comes around.
This time, David attacks Sequeira with Tymna, looking for land drops and spreading the love around.
Now at this point there are many things to consider. Originally, I planned to cast Vampiric Tutor for a Gilded Drake and take out the Najeela. But Sinestra doesn't have Drake in this list because he doesn't like to win, so that option is out. I can also Chain of Vapor the Tymna and severely delay David, hoping he'll bounce the Najeela. The odds are super slim though. Thus, I decide that I need to take the damage and hope he draws a solution.
David doesn't find a land. He casts Mana Crypt for 2 mana, big yikes, and moves to end step. Sequeira uses this moment to Chain of Vapor the Najeela and secretly hope that Claire continues the chain. She doesn't, of course. Sequeira draws and passes once again, not finding a land to drop. I remind him that he's able to cast Tasigur now, losing the Birds of Paradise in the process. You know, just so he has that information, but he chooses not to. What a weirdo. Claire shocks in an Overgrown Tomb. She casts a Mindblade Render and a Najeela, intending to grind as well. Probably through Sequeira, since everyone's having fun hitting him for card advantage. We go to my turn and I play Mana Confluence, just because I enjoy my lands hurting me. I join the Hit Sequeira for card advantage club and tap 4 to cast a Toski.
Which I wish he wouldn't, to be honest.
Then we move to the worst phase in cEDH, or whatever, combat. I swing at Sequeira with my Thalia and draw 1 before passing. David takes damage from his crypt and plays Vault of Champions. He taps into the same source of card advantage as I did, punching Sequeira, and draws 1. Archon of Emeria comes out next, and he passes to end step. Sequeira takes this opportunity to fire off a Vampiric Tutor.
In this moment, the table is slightly concerned on whether they ended up killing the game with all the taxing and giving me a way to win. It's simply not possible right now. And with Gilded Drake not being an option, my hands are pretty tied. I end up fetching for a very specific idea in Opposition Agent, although the desire to get a land was pretty big. Opposition Agent's Flash can help me kill Mindblade Render if it comes at me, or perhaps get me a fetch. Other options were Remora, very hard to be relevant at the table, and a basic land. I go for Opposition Agent as it's good enough to also prevent others, aside from Claire, from drawing cards.
Sequeira did not make the smart choice to Vampiric Tutor for a land, and passes instead. We're not sure what's up, but it's Claire's turn and she plays a tapped Watery Grave. I also remind her she can still pay the 2 life and nothing will happen, but she declines. Claire moves to combat. She looks to defuse Sequeira's removal ideas by swinging with Mindblade Render instead of Najeela, and falls for Sequeira's trap card, Opposition Agent. The agent blocks the Mindblade Render, killing it and stopping Claire's grind plan in its tracks. But not before she gets to draw a single 1 off of it because the trigger still happens this combat. Claire's not done, however. At the end of combat, she activates Najeela so that she can attack once more. She sends Najeela at me since there's no risk in losing her to a Toski block, and then 3 warriors at poor Cicada. Claire regains a bunch of life before passing. On my turn, I swing at the fully open Claire and get 2 draws off of bestest boy Toski. I drop a tapped Tundra and cast Emil, as it's both a combo piece and protection. Then, I let David take it. His crypt slaps him a second time. He sends Tymna at Claire and Archon at me, drawing 2 cards and finding a forest.
David now has a chance to cast Archon of Valor's Reach. However, that doesn't stop us from potentially getting overrun by Najeela's board. He does have an Elesh Norn in hand, and getting a turn so we can try and make it is vital. As such, he casts an Imperial Seal, fully aware that I'll be able to get the card and see his juicy hand. He then shares his list with me, and the table openly discusses the best way to disarm Claire. Politics in cEDH? I chose to take a basic swamp, much to everyone's surprise. I already have a way to deal with Najeela, and really need the mana instead of a Swords to Plowshares, especially with Elesh Norn coming for my boy Birds of Paradise.
That being David's spell for the turn, he passes. Cicada plays the swamp on his turn and passes to Claire, deciding to risk the deflecting swat here. Claire would need it plus a win con to take the match. If she has protection, she won't get the second combat, which is also relevant. She plays a tapped Tundra and moves to combat. Cicada casts Abrupt Decay targeting Najeela, and Claire does protect it with a Veil of Summer. This diffuses the threat level immensely, as she's also not aware of the white Praetor inbound. Claire swings 10 at David's open board to maximize damage in warriors. I drop a tapped Tropical Island and send everything at Claire, drawing 3 more. Game's starting to look mighty grindy. I drop an Ishai, also unaware of the incoming Elesh Norn, and not paying for Emiel's trigger to make Ishai larger. David swings at me and Claire once more, drawing 2 cards. He finds a bountiful promenade and doesn't waste a second to cast Elesh Norn. Ishai triggers and then dies. Rip in peace, you beautiful bird monk. The board becomes a lot less cluttered as David positions himself to completely destroy us here. He passes. Cicada delves away all but the Abrupt Decay to cast Tasigur, and also passes. And Claire just untaps and goes to end step. Who knew Elesh Norn could bully a table? On Claire's end step though, I have a plan and cast a Worldly Tutor.
The entire table already sees where this is going. Gilded Drake. Being on a creature deck himself, Scoots getting the Drake here is really hot. The war for Elesh Norn begins, except where I'm concerned because I don't have a lot of ways to participate. Still on a creature deck table, despite other threats such as Thoracle, which the Archon handles, whoever has Elesh Norn is pretty much winning.
I start my turn with the Gilded Drake, and David finds it's too much of a bargain to pass on, giving me that Elesh Norn in return. I then remind Cicada that his life total has been stable for far too long, and send Emil this way. That was a horse joke, in case you missed it. Stable? With that spell out of the way, it's now David's turn once again. David's crypt hits him, baby, one more time. He plays a Gemstone Caverns. He casts Vivian Monster's Advocate to look for a way to either combo out or stabilize the board. Vivian creates a 1/1, well, technically a 3/3, beast with reach, and David passes. Cicada casts the closest to a land he has at the moment, a Lotus Petal. He passes, and Claire does the draw go thing, hoping to survive long enough to deal with Elesh Norn. Back to my turn, I drop a Phantasmal Image to copy the Gilded Drake, taking David's Archon to my side, just so I can start killing faster and also be able to drop Kamahl as soon as I hit any land. I swing Elesh Norn at the Vivian and Emil at Claire, keeping the heat on. David blocks Elesh with the Beast token, and I pass. At this point, we're pretty sure David's crypt has something personal against him, and the way he's rolling, we advise him to never play Krakashima. David -2s the Vivian and drops a Wandering Archaic, before searching his library for something good. He gets a Gisela, just some random angel, right?
I take this moment to remind the table that David is trying to assemble the Brizella combination, since his Kamahl allows him to go for that plan. The Beats plan keeps on keeping on here. But to be honest, it'd be really hard to see it happen.
Sequeira's turn is Big Excite, with him dropping a Mana Confluence tapped, and then his secret hidden Mox Opal, which does nothing. He passes. Claire follows in those footsteps by dropping a Mox Diamond and pitching a Mana Confluence. Only big plays at this table. On my turn, I don't find a land, but I do find something similar. Ish. If you close your eyes. I cast it, forgetting the tax from my Thorn of Amethyst, a Smothering Tithe. Claire thinks on the tithe a bit and chooses to Swansong it. After all, they're dead to Kamahl, and the Swansong isn't going to hit a lot of stuff at the moment. I get a buffed out Burb and then swing all I can at Vivian, not really keen on seeing Brizella. David blocks with Gisela and the 2 Gilded Drakes. No appreciation for gifts whatsoever. I pass, feeling the doom here. Surprise, we're on David's turn, and he -2s the Vivian. He then taps 7 mana, not 8, and reveals that he had actually drawn the Bruna, casting her and triggering Vivian.
Ironically, having to cast Bruna kinda saved us the game here. In response to the trigger on Vivian, I'm able to cast a Force of Will, exiling Pact of Negation and paying 2 for the Wandering Archaic to counter Bruna. This prevents certain doom, but also deprives all of our watchers of the coolest meld in MTG history. Maybe some other time. David is then obligated to play responsibly and get a Dranith Magistrate to stop the Kamahl Doom Clock from Scoots. Only tight plays, and all of them mattering, and keeping this match going.
We go to Sequeira's turn, who just draws and passes to Claire, again with the shenanigans, or just completely destroyed by what's going on. Claire also draws and goes, and I'm back in the saddle. I swing everything at Claire, trying to deal with the most threatening players in order. Pushed into a corner, Claire is obligated to cast Snap on the Elishnorn, paying for the Wandering Archaic's trigger, and hoping I don't have anything. I don't! The Elishnorn sadly returns to David's hand, and Claire gets hit for a bunch. To try and delay David's ability to get Elishnorn going, I drop a Null Rod and pass. We're on turn 9 and it's David's time, and that's almost a kind of rhyme. Now that it's no longer active, the Crypt decides to spare him the usual punishment, sadly. David finds a land for Elishnorn, but it's a tapped Windswept Heath. Back on his BS, David casts an Archon of Valor's Reach, and I have to react with an Enlightened Tutor here, paying for the Wandering Archaic trigger. I get a Paladin class to mitigate Elishnorn's incoming impact a little bit.
Paladin class being tutored makes David waver on his initial idea to lock out instants. However, Archon still being on the stack, Claire decides to use this window to abrupt decay David's Dranith Magistrate. These plays increase the pressure on his decision. If he locks out instants, it doesn't stop him from potentially being outpressured by Scoots on Kamahl and just die. If he chooses his enchantments, it tempos Scoots by at least 1 turn cycle, perhaps giving him the chance to kill him in the meantime. It also takes a win con option from Claire in the long run. The decay makes another trigger for Archaic and David copies it, looking for the right target. Archon of Emeria doesn't sound like a good idea here, and he ends up choosing the Mana Crypt to prevent himself from dying to his own damage. David is forced to consider his options, and ultimately chooses Enchantment as the Archon of Valor's Reach's lock, to temp out Scoots and try to win.
On David's end step, Sequeira activates Tasigur for the very first time, and chooses Claire. She goes for the Force to make Sequeira able to interact with a possible Elishnorn or maybe even Kamahl. Sequeira drops a tapped Breeding Pool here. He sacrifices Tasigur to Phyrexian Tower and plays a Seedborn Muse, looking to, just maybe, get the Tasigur grind machine going next turn cycle. He passes. On Claire's turn, she and Sequeira untap, and she casts her Najeela, passing to me and my amazing draw thanks to that Archon. I simply cast a Weathered Wayfarer, not a combo piece with Derevi and Emil at all, please ignore, and we go back to David. David cracks his fetch, and like a stinker, he plays basic lands and gets an untapped plains, and casts Elishnorn. The War of 1,000 Elishnorns continues. The table looks at Sequeira, who allows it to resolve here, possibly lacking a blue card to pitch, as the forest costs 6 to hardcast. David moves to combat and swings at me with the Archon for 7 before passing to Sequeira's turn. Sequeira drops a tapped Ancient Tomb. He delves and casts the Tasigur, hoping that the grind plan works out, and passes to Claire, who just had to bury Najeela once again from the Elishnorn. Claire has no plays, so Sequeira activates Tasigur on her end step. She gives him a Tainted Pact and passes to me.
Claire knows she's walking over the line here, but giving me a worthless card will never help her case, and Abrupt Decay could be a dangerous card to give me. So she goes for the one card that can help me tutor for something clutch, hoping it doesn't end the game instead.
I don't find a land because, of course I don't, and so I move to my end step as well. Sequeira casts the Tainted Pact on my end step. What could he be looking for? He's forced to stop at Thassa's Oracle, as he doesn't have many other available ways to win, despite the Archon stopping him here. We're on David's turn. Turn 11 here, a new record for the channel. David plays a tapped Verdant Catacombs and swings everything at Sequeira. Sequeira activates Tasigur in response. We have a large moment of thinking here, and then I choose to give him a Time Twister. Sequeira uses Tasigur to block the Wandering Archaic here, so he doesn't just disappear from the table. On second main, David casts Tymna. Sequeira goes to his turn and is pretty tight on options. He casts the Time Twister, happy to have kept the Seedborn around since Archon stops him from doing anything else afterwards. The Twister resolves, and he plays a tapped Verdant Catacombs and moves to end step. In this moment, Claire casts a Vampiric Tutor and pays for the Archaic.
In case you're wondering, it's another Gillidrake. That's right, the war for the Elish continues, but it's Claire's best option not to drop dead from David's board, as a Rift would be too dangerous here, and just a temporary fix.
Claire plays a tapped Savannah, and here comes another offer for David's Elishnorn. However, he thinks that turning Gilded Drake into a farmer with swords to plowshares might be a more interesting conclusion here. Sequeira cracks the Catacombs for a swamp. He doesn't have counter magic for the swords, but Claire did mention she had it herself, and so he casts an Abrupt Decay on the Archon here to free that option up. He pays so the Archaic doesn't copy it. Claire Force of Wills the swords to plowshares, also paying for the Wandering Archaic. She passes, but not before the cutest Elishnorn doodle ever. It's now my turn. I don't even miss a beat as a phantasmal image comes down, copying Elishnorn. It's the 5th time something happens to that praetor. I cast a Yisan and choose not to attack. I'm really close to winning here. David goes to his turn and casts Demonic Tutor. He gets a Winds of Abandon, drops Savannah, and passes here, hoping to survive another turn cycle. Fat chance. We go to Sequeira's turn. He plays a Waterlogged Grove and casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting Claire here. We're wondering what kind of interaction he'll get here, and then he doesn't. He gets Demonic Consultation. Sequeira then casts Thassa's Oracle. With the Oracle on the stack, he sacrifices it to the Phyrexian Tower and casts Demonic Consultation, naming Endurance, just to really rub it in. We have no responses, and Sequeira gets the win.
Sorry for the Thoracle Consult win here, guys, but it had to be done. I tried to slowly and sneakily create the window of opportunity after the Time Twister. Thankfully, the table chose not to take me out. In general, this is a good indication that a combo deck is never really dead until you can smell their corpse from where you sit. Sometimes it's okay to pressure them further, even if you want them around to interact. But other than that, try to kill them when you can. We're also really happy that each deck was able to showcase what they can do. Najeela didn't go infinite, but even the idea of non-deterministic extra combats was enough to make Claire a threat and make me allow the game to progress into the Elish War TM. She was still clearly participating in the match and trying to create her window of opportunity. Scoots' deck didn't manage to play Kamahl, but it was clear that this wasn't what we needed to see happen here. With a single Gilded Drake though, he consistently moved the game into his favor and was present for every small but meaningful play. Were it not for the constant war, he might have been able to win. And finally, David's card advantage on Tymna and hard-hitting stacks pieces steered the entire game. He even had a chance to present Brizella, were it not for the unlucky draw. Some decisions from his side also definitely ended in pushing the victory one way or another. The most important of all having been the Archon. Had Instant been chosen, it was very probable that he would have won. But there were risks in doing that as well. Overall, this was a gigantic and exciting game.
We'd really like to thank David for joining us this week, and we want to say we made Sequiera promise not to mock Sinestra's builds for 2 weeks for not including a Gilded Drake. What a pain that was for him. We also want to thank our watchers and once again remind everyone that every like and subscribe and comment and share of the video boosts our channel's relevance and really helps us get more stuff out there. We hope you're enjoying the format and we're hoping for all of your constructive criticism. Until our next match, I have been Scoots, we have been the WhoBrewedThis crew. Keep things spicy. We're out.